The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is May 30th, 2025, and there has been a lot of news since my last video. Now, before I start, I just want to repeat, because I think I said this in one of my previous videos, that I will be going on a vacation within Italy, and I will not be back until probably around maybe June 15th, June 16th at the earliest, and maybe at the latest, the 18th. But yeah, I will be on hiatus for a while, so you will not be able to interact with me on any like social media platform like Twitter X, Telegram, Discord, whatever. I will not be available at all because I want to take the time to enjoy life without observing this conflict, and also just enjoying Italy as a whole, because I've never been to Europe before. I've always wanted to see it, and I am glad that for the very first time in my life, I will be able to see Europe. And who would have thought that the very first country I'd see within this continent would be the former capital of the Roman Empire? How fitting is it, right? But anyway, enough about my personal life, and let's talk about the situation in Ukraine. And oh my, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. So first of all, let's go to the Kherson direction. Nothing. Even though the rest of the front seems to be heating up, nothing has been going on here. And it's the same thing also in Zaporozhye front. But that may not last for long, because we got news coming in that Zelyne Pole, which is one of the last villages in southern Donetsk that is bordering Zaporozhye, was taken by the Russians. And this was confirmed, by the way, by Deep State UA. So the capture is authentic. It is very much real. And the Russians are about to enter Zaporozhye Oblast from the east. But also, by capturing Zelyne Pole, they are also 2 square kilometers away from Dnipropetrovsk in this direction. And these 2 villages will be wide open for the taking. And also, there is report that Novopol is mostly under Russian control, with this strip here still remaining contested. I do expect it to fall while I'm away. I mean, it's obviously going to fall. It's only a matter of time. And then after that, the Russians are going to start their push into Zaporozhye Oblast, like eastwards towards the town of Guleipol, but also maybe do a little push up north towards Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. I mean, yeah, they're going to literally enter it in this direction. It's quite obvious at this point because there's so many empty fields and shack villages. And then you have the situation unfolding in the Komar direction, or the former Kharkove/Andriivka direction. Apparently, it was geolocated that the Russians control these fields here outside of the village of Bogatyr. And by the way, Ukraine fanboys are still claiming that that Ukrainians still control it, which is laughable because they literally are posting old recycled footage that was literally taken a week or 2 ago. That's probably no longer even credible. And yeah, it's all but certain that the Russians do control Bogatyr, and I don't understand why they seem to think otherwise. But yeah, so Bogatyr is pretty much secured, and the battle for Komar is inevitable, especially now with the confirmed capture of the village of Visily. Visily is, again, another village not far from the border with Dnipropetrovsk region. But they do have to take Shevchenko and Voskressenka in order to enter Dnipro here. And besides, now that they are above this defensive line, I honestly don't know what else the Ukrainians can really do to stop the Russian advance. that would seize the remainder of the southern portion of Donetsk region. It seems all but imminent that it's going to fall during the summer. I mean, the ground is dry, it's hot, it's dirty, it's perfect for vehicle movements. And then going up a little north, we have the situation near Dnipropetrovsk region in the Pokrovsk/Krasnoyarsk direction. It is now confirmed, according to Deep State UA, that the village of Troitske is under Russian control. And with this, the Russians now pretty much can mess around all they want in these fields, but they still, however, need to take the village of Horikove before they can, of course, get back to the border with Dnipropetrovsk. Apparently, this is all contested area here, so who really knows, like, who actually controls it? We haven't really heard much activity from Marovka and Novomykhailivka, because Ukrainians are fighting really hard for these villages. They are fighting really hard because they do not, probably under Zelensky's orders, to not let the Russians into Dnipropetrovsk by any means necessary, even though we all know that this is a futile resistance and that the Russians are probably going to enter it anyway, like, regardless of what they try to do on defense. And by the way, before I go any further, there is a report that the Ukrainians are building a defense that will go from the Kharkiv direction all the way down to Zaporozhye region. Now, while I do think this makes sense, it's too little too late. Well, at least in my opinion. I don't think the Ukrainians have enough manpower to stop the Russian advance this summer. But time will tell if what I'm saying right now is complete crap. Because people thought Ukrainians were cooked last year, but they weren't. They still kept going because they still had a lot of guys to go through. Unfortunately, that is because now many of them are incapacitated, like permanently disabled, like lost a limb or two, if not more, or have died, like while fighting the Russians. Udachne is still in limbo. But I wouldn't be surprised if this falls during the summer campaign. Kotline has not changed. The situation in Krasnoyarsk/Pokrovsk direction has not changed as a whole. I mean, literally, nothing has changed, like, here, like, south and west of Pokrovsk. And, but yeah. But, however, news is not looking good from the eastern direction. Holy crap. Yep, folks, this is not a joke. What you're seeing right here, right now, is not bullshit. The Russians have literally advanced and have completely steamrolled the Ukrainians in the Konstantinivka direction. Literally. The villages of Henitivka, Staromykolaivka, and the majority of Zorya have been taken by the Russians. There's still some fighting for these commie blocks here, but it's probably going to come to a close within a matter of days, if not a week from now. And it's also now been confirmed by Deep State UA that Romanovka has been taken too by the Russians. This pocket here has been closed. It has ceased to exist. And if you ask me, I think it all but seals the fate of the neighboring city of Toretsk. And it has also sealed the fate to perhaps the village of Yablonovka. I wouldn't be surprised if within a matter of 1 to 2 weeks, if not maybe like 3 at most, that this village comes under Russian control. But maybe it could go longer than that. Like, we'll see. But I definitely think it's going to fall to Russia. And then once they do, they will not be far from the village of Berostok, which is the last village before you enter the city of Konstantinovka. Now, what I also think is going to happen is that the Russians are going to try to take the villages of Stepanovka and Dova Bolka. And I also think they got to take Razkishine and also Ilinivka. Once they take these 4, then Konstantinovka is, honestly, if you ask me, it's pretty much cooked. But speaking of which, let's also go to like other villages in this direction. Popovyar easily fell, mostly without a fight. Poltavka is still being contested, but I'm expecting the Russians to take this very soon. Ruzhin Yar, not Chazov Yar, it's like more like Chazov Yar at home, that is, has not been contested for yet, but it's definitely going to soon, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians take this pretty quickly, and then maybe stop here for now. And then in, further westwards, Malinovka has fallen, as many have confirmed by now. Mayern is still contested, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has fallen by now, again. Russians reported the taking of Shevchenko-Pershi, but Syriac has not confirmed that yet, and I think we still need to wait a little longer before we can get confirmation on that. And by the way, the current direction of the advance is it literally signals to me that they're going to try to flank Mayanograd and Pokrovsk from the north. Like, what they're going to do is they're going to try to take the series of villages here, especially Volodymirivka and Shakove, and then they're going to go down to this road here, which eventually goes to Konstantinovka. No, actually, Slavyansk and the Kramatorsk, and also Dobropilia, and then they'll besiege both cities from the north. And also from here, then they will try to cut the E50 road, which will effectively put these two cities in a massive cauldron. As far as I know, the Russians are likely going to be able to pull this off this summer, and I wouldn't be too surprised if the Ukrainians mostly try fleeing both cities, like the Twin Cities, without that much of a fight. Sort of like how we saw in Selidov and Ugledar during its last days, because everything is cut off, and there's just no way they would be able to supply the cities in the way they want them to. Like, it would be impossible. Like, the cities would be uninhabitable. Or unhabitable, that is. Sorry. But yeah. Pokrovsk and Mayanograd are in big trouble. And so is the Dnipropetrovsk region. But now let's move to Toretsk. So apparently the Russians have started advancing again in this direction. And if you ask me, folks, I don't really think there's any Ukrainians left in Toretsk city itself. I think they have mostly fled it by now. And I mean, look, I doubt there's really anybody in this pocket left. Along here, too. It was all just a bunch of skirmishes, if you ask me. Neither in Zabolka District, too. I do think they're definitely here still. But within Toretsk itself, nope. No more. And there's also now reports that the Russians are advancing towards the village of Delivka. And I wouldn't be surprised if this pocket here gets cleared, which would then make an advance on here much easier. But there is an elephant in the room we need to discuss. And that is, of course, Chazov Yar. We have big news to report. The town center of Chazov Yar has finally been seized after many months of fighting. The Russians have finally taken central Chazov Yar, and they are literally, the Battle of Chazov Yar is coming to a close. At long last for the Russians, Chazov Yar is pretty much going to be behind them. And with the taking of Chazov Yar, they will finally now have the high ground on Konstantinovka and perhaps Slavyansk Kramatorsk too, but also Druskovka. Like, literally, this strip of cities here, like this massive urban area here, is going to be under, like, fire control by the Russians, like with FPV drones, artillery shellings, you name it. It's all going to be under Russian, like, fire this entire summer because of Chazov Yar being taken by the Russians. And while all of the administrative borders have not been seized yet, the Battle of Chazov Yar is in its final weeks. I do think it realistically has one more month left in it, but it's literally coming to the end. We are literally at the end of Chazov Yar, and you know, I think the reason why this battle went on for so long was because the quality of the Russian troops that were sent there were nowhere as high as the Russian soldiers, for instance, like in Toretsk, Pokrovsk direction, Velika Novosilka direction, Kharkiv, or even Sumy directions. They were nowhere as good. But yet they still were able to pull this off. And Ukrainians really did all they could to stop the Russians from taking this town. But in the end, resistance was futile, and the town, as far as I know, is going to fall to Russia anyway. It's in ruins, but I don't think the Russians care because they just want that high ground to fire upon Konstantinovka so that a capture of the city would go on a lot faster. Or more like happen a lot faster, that is. Now, in the Siversk direction, Russians are again advancing. The village of Verkhonokamensky has fallen to Russia. I think I reported that in my last video, but I don't care, honestly, because I'm just basically recapping everything here. And the Russians are still advancing here. But otherwise, Siversk front is pretty much quiet. In the Liman direction, well, this particular part of the Liman direction, there is a bit of confusion over who controls Turskey. Apparently, Ukrainians were here. They were trying to flank and, I guess, encircle the Russians, but it seems like the Russians have booted out the Ukrainians from here, I think. I mean, that's a report said by Radov. That's like one of the pro-RU Telegram channels who's actually reliable and not like a Delulu coping account like Divjin could be. But, yeah, apparently there's a report that the Russians have cleared out this Ukrainian attack here, and now they have, like, a way to get back into Torsk again. I don't know if this attack is going to be successful, but as far as I know, it seems like the town is not captured by the Russians yet, but still rather contested, and I do agree with that. Mayern, while not confirmed, apparently was recaptured by Russia. But, again, Syriac has not confirmed it yet, so maybe it's not true. Kolodiazi, or Kolodiazi, is still contested, but I'm expecting this to fall in the coming weeks. And then, the village of Ridkodub has been captured by Russia entirely. Even Deep State has kind of confirmed it by now. And with this, they are officially at the border with Kharkiv region in the south. Well, on the Olsk River, that is. The Russians just need to cross this reservoir here. And yeah, they're in. But they also, I think, need to capture Karpovka first before they can take Vovchiyar and Lazove. But once they take these trio of villages here, pretty much everything in the southern Olskol like pocket for the Ukrainians will have to be cleared out. Like the Ukrainians, for instance, will have to abandon the town of Borova without a fight. Because if you guys see here, the Olska River, at least in this part of the front, is deep and wide. It's not like in the further north, within like Kupiansk itself, where the river is shallow and narrow. It's actually quite wide here. And the bridges, since they're destroyed, they will have no choice but to probably flee south or to, like, cross the river. They cannot defend this unless they want to get more of their guys killed or stuck, like, captured by the Russians as a whole. So I predict what will happen is Russians are going to keep advancing in this direction here through this strip of 3 villages. They'll cut off Borova from the south. And then the Ukrainians are going to be like, oh, shit, and they'll leave Borova. They will not resist. But if they do resist, they'd be making a grave mistake if they do. But yeah, I think Borova is going to fall, mostly without a fight, but if it doesn't, then I think they'd be screwing up big time by doing that. But yeah, I digress. We move on to the northern Kupiansk front. Apparently there's a report, especially by the Russian Ministry of Defense, that the village of Kondrashovka has fallen to the Russians. And if this were to be true, this would mean that Kupiansk, like, round 4 is underway. Because the Russians tried to take Kupiansk earlier this year, and it failed miserably. But if the rumors are true that Kondrashovka is being, like, taken by the Russians again, like we saw in the earlier phase of the war, then this will be big trouble for Kupiansk's northern flanks. And things, as you know by now, are not looking good for the Ukrainians in the Kharkiv region as a whole. The Russians have reportedly kept advancing, not just outside of the village of Kamienka, but they have also now crossed the border here and have taken the village of Stroivka. And with this, the Russians now have a pretty much steady bridgehead, like, crossing across, like, the whole border. And if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if this whole section here falls to the Russians easily. And if so, that's going to be a big problem for the Ukrainians, because this would signal that an offensive on the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region is going to be in big trouble. Veliki Burluk and Volchansk are pretty much cooked in this case. While the Ukrainians are setting up defenses here, I don't think they're going to be successful. Why? They don't have enough manpower to stop the Russian advances, first of all. And secondly, the Russians clearly have the logistical advantage here. Like, the Russians can just advance from the land, no problem. But the Ukrainians here are sort of separated by the Siversky Donets River. So they're going to have a lot of problems supplying this area. And I wouldn't be surprised if Russians launch another cross-border operation from here or here just to start advancing on the town of Veliki Burlik, as I said earlier. But yeah, things are not looking good for them here too. And then in Volchansk, things are bad. It appears that the armed forces of Ukraine have lost their momentum completely in Volchansk, and now it appears that the northern part of the town is under Russian control. Syriac has not confirmed it yet because, well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I don't honestly think he's wrong, but apparently Russians are in control of most of the northern part of Volchansk, and as far as I can see, yeah, it doesn't look like Ukrainians are really here anymore. It looks like they're fleeing across the Vovcha River and hoping to set up a better defense there. But the problem, though, for the guys in the southern part of Volchansk is that most of this is all low-rise private housing areas. The commune blocks, like the next series of commune blocks, are not until this area here. So Russia is, in my opinion, if they cross the Vovcha River, which is very shallow and narrow, by the way, I don't really think they're going to have that much of a problem, maybe except here, I guess, like near this train station. But otherwise, again, as I said, I don't think they're going to really have that issue with southern Volchansk. I mean, time will tell if they do struggle, and it wouldn't surprise me if they do struggle here like they did throughout the entirety of, like, 2024 and the first half of 2025. But if they're able to take Volchansk, then that just tells me the armed forces of Ukraine are in Kharkiv region, well, in the northeastern section, are cooked, and that they've given up this front. Yeah, Russians have also advanced here, eastwards, towards, the bordering areas here. And I guess they're going to try to take all these villages back. And then, nothing going on in the Lipsy direction. Nothing in this part of the Kharkiv region. And finally, last but not least, we're now going to talk about the situation in Sumy. Oh my. So, as all of you know by now, the Russians have pretty much recaptured all of the Kursk region with the exception of some parts of Titkino. But other than that, though, it appears that the Russians are basically on the march within Sumy itself. So after capturing Zorovka, Novinky, Basovka, Bilovody, the Russians have now further increased their presence within Sumy. They have captured the village of Lakhnia. They have captured Voldoli, Vlodomirivka, Konstantinovka, Vasilivka, and are rumored to be fighting for the village of Yablonivka. There's even reports that Russians have even captured Oleksivka and are advancing on the villages of Varachny and Novomykolaivka. And of course, I forgot, Yanukovka is now being contested too. Apparently, this was the base of operations for the Ukrainians when they were invading Kursk and I guess Belgrade, but now it seems the Russians have turned the tables on the Ukrainians in Sumy region. I mean, this is the first time the Russians have had any real solid presence within Sumy for the first time in 3 years. And if the Russians are able to capture these series of villages here, Sumy City itself is in big trouble. And with the recent attacks going on in Tikhino, I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians begin an advance from here all the way down to Sumy. I do think what they're going to do, though, is they're going to try to advance from here. They'll try to advance westwards towards this road here that goes into Sumy and try to cut off the town of Bilopelia. Now, this could easily be set up to be the next Volchansk if things go as bad as Volchansk did. But otherwise, though, I think the Russians are going to take a sizable chunk of Sumy this summer, and I also expect the Russians to attack the village of Myropelia as well. These areas outside of this green forest here are going to be under attack by Russia this summer, and I wouldn't be surprised if sometime, like maybe later this fall or so, the Russians decide, you know what, fuck it, we might as well declare Sumy as a part of the Russian Federation. And if the Russians do attack Sumy City, which is not very likely because it's probably well fortified and defended, it becomes a very difficult thing for the Ukrainians to deal with. And apparently there's a report that Ukrainian troops are being redeployed from Sumy to the Konstantinovka front. I don't know how true this is, but if such rumors are to be confirmed, then, as I said, a large chunk of Sumy region is probably going to fall to Russia this summer. Mosno, who is like a pro-RU Ukrainian, who's from Sumy, like I think he was born and raised there, he warned that there is a high probability that Russians are going to reach the city of Sumy because of the questionable defenses there. Now, as for Chernigov, I don't think anything will happen here because it's way too foresty and the logistics are just not there. But yeah, I think Sumy is going to be in very deep trouble if they don't do anything about the defenses. I mean, as far as I know, it seems as if the Ukrainians' high command are prioritizing Donbas over Sumy. And if this were to be true, that would be stupid because retaking Sumy region from the Russians was like one of the key or one of the major accomplishments of the Ukrainians' counteroffensive in spring of 2022. And if the Russian offensive in Kharkiv region were to be successful this year, it would only make things far worse. Now, before I get going, apparently the Russians and Ukrainians are going to have another series of talks in Istanbul on June the 2nd. And there's a lot of hot potato play right now between the Ukrainians and the Russians, but even the Americans too. There's also a report that Germany is going to send like Taurus missiles, but so far Chancellor Merz has denied it, though they are sending them weapons regardless. So I think they're sending them pieces to assemble a Taurus missile. But as far as I can see things, I feel like these negotiations are just nothing more than political theater, honestly, and nothing really anything too serious. The Russians and Ukrainians are so like far apart on key issues that I think they're ultimately just going to yell at each other and go back home. Rather be to Moscow, to Kiev, or maybe Lvov, I guess, or perhaps to wherever hiding space they are in within Eastern Europe or the Middle East. I don't think anything's going to get done in Istanbul. Again. So, with that being said, everybody, that's all I got to say for today's video. I hope you all found it informative, entertaining, and I'll see you all in mid-June. I hope every single one of you has a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, and peace out. Bye.